Welcome to Fear Files, where the shadows hold secrets and the echoes of the past refuse to rest. From malevolent spirits in ancient artifacts to vengeful entities lurking within dense fogs, each story unravels the darkness that binds them. Prepare for a night of spine-chilling tales that will leave you questioning what lies beyond the veil. Welcome to Fear Files, where fear has found its voice.
The fog rolled in slowly, like a living thing, creeping through the streets of Harrow's Bay and enveloping the town in a suffocating shroud. Sarah watched from her small cottage by the sea, a sense of unease settling in her chest. The fog was unlike anything she had seen before, thick, impenetrable, and unnaturally silent. She ventured out, drawn by the need to understand this phenomenon. The air was cold and damp, and as she walked, she heard faint whispers carried on the breeze. The voices were indistinct, merging with the rustle of the fog, creating an eerie symphony that set her nerves on edge. Sarah wasn't the only one who had noticed the fog. Around town, lights flickered on as other residents peered out from their windows, curiosity and fear etched on their faces. Some, braver or perhaps more foolhardy, ventured outside only to be swallowed by the mist. The first screams pierced the night, sending a chill down Sarah's spine. She rushed towards the sound, her flashlight beam cutting through the fog, but found nothing, only empty streets and the oppressive silence. It was as if the fog had consumed the very people who had dared to challenge it. The next day, Sarah met with Margaret, an elderly woman who had lived in Harrow's Bay her entire life. Margaret's eyes were clouded with cataracts, but her mind was sharp, filled with the knowledge of the town's past. She spoke of the legend of the Wraith, a tale passed down through generations. "Every 100 years," Margaret whispered, "the fog returns, and with it, the spirit of Nathaniel Blackwood. He was a sorcerer, you see, a man who delved into dark arts and made a pact with forces beyond our world. When the townsfolk discovered his deeds, they cursed him, binding his spirit to the fog. But his hunger for power is insatiable. He seeks to break free, and to do that, he needs to consume souls." Determined to save the town, Sarah and a group of survivors began to search for answers. They pored over old books, consulted forgotten tomes, and pieced together the fragments of the town's history. Each clue brought them closer to understanding the Wraith and the nature of his curse. They discovered that Nathaniel Blackwood had hidden his heart, a talisman of immense power, somewhere in the town. Destroying it was the key to breaking the curse and dispelling the fog, but finding it was no easy task. It was hidden in a place only revealed through a series of riddles and cryptic clues. As Sarah and her companions unraveled the clues, the fog grew thicker, the whispers louder, and the shadows more menacing. Each step brought them closer to danger, and each revelation came at a cost. Friends were lost, consumed by the fog, their screams haunting those who remained. But Sarah pressed on, driven by a determination to save the town and honor the memory of her brother, whose disappearance she now suspected was linked to the Wraith. She pieced together the final clue, leading her to an ancient, overgrown graveyard on the outskirts of Harrow's Bay. In the graveyard, Sarah and her remaining companions found an old mausoleum, its entrance hidden beneath layers of ivy and thyme. Inside, they discovered the heart of Nathaniel Blackwood, encased in a crystal orb that pulsed with a malevolent energy. The Wraith's voice echoed around them, a cacophony of rage and desperation. As they prepared to destroy the heart, the fog surged into the mausoleum, coalescing into a spectral form. The Wraith, a towering figure of shadows and malice, loomed before them, its eyes burning with hatred. It attacked with a fury born of centuries of imprisonment, determined to protect its lifeline. A fierce battle ensued, the survivors fighting not just for their lives, but for the very soul of Harrow's Bay. Sarah faced the Wraith, her determination unwavering, even as the entity's power threatened to overwhelm her. She struck the heart with the ceremonial dagger, the blade glowing with a light that pierced the darkness. With a final deafening scream, the wraith was vanquished. The heart shattered, the fog dissipated, and the whispers fell silent. The town of Harrow's Bay was free from the curse that had haunted it for centuries. In the aftermath, the survivors emerged into the dawn light, the town bathed in a warmth that seemed to banish the lingering shadows. Harrow's Bay began to heal, its residents slowly returning to their lives, forever changed by the events they had endured. Sarah stood by the sea, the waves lapping at her feet, and felt a sense of peace. She had uncovered the truth, faced her fears, and saved her town. As she looked out over the horizon, she knew that Harrow's Bay would remember the darkness, but it would also remember the light that had dispelled it. It was a typical morning in Harrow's Edge, the kind that the townsfolk took for granted. The fishermen were out early, casting their nets into the sea. Children were heading to school, and the shopkeepers were opening their stores along Main Street. The old lighthouse stood sentinel, its light cutting through the morning haze. Evelyn Carter, the town's marine biologist, was conducting her usual research near the rocky shore. She had moved to Harrow's Edge 3 years ago, drawn by the town's rich marine life and the peaceful escape it offered from the chaos of her previous life in the city. With her keen curiosity and dedication to preserving the local ecosystem, Evelyn quickly became a beloved figure in the community. As she collected samples, she noticed a strange shift in the air. The usually brisk, salty breeze had stilled, replaced by an eerie silence. Evelyn glanced out to sea and saw a thick, unnatural fog rolling in, far denser than the usual morning mist. By the time she packed up her equipment and headed back to town, the fog had enveloped everything. It clung to the ground and twisted through the streets, reducing visibility to mere feet. Evelyn's heart raced as she heard the first whispers, a chorus of soft, indistinct voices that seemed to emanate from the fog itself. The fog did not lift. It stayed throughout the day and deepened as night fell. The whispers grew louder, unsettling the townspeople. Those who dared venture outside claimed they saw fleeting shadows moving within the mist, accompanied by chilling, disembodied voices. The first disappearance was a child named Tommy Larkin. He had gone out to play that afternoon and never returned. His mother's frantic calls echoed through the fog, but there was no answer. The next morning, others followed. Fishermen, shopkeepers, even the town's mailman. Each disappearance left only faint whispers and shadows in their wake. Evelyn joined the search parties, her scientific mind struggling to rationalize the phenomena. She collected samples of the fog, hoping to find a natural explanation, but her equipment offered no answers. Desperation grew as more people vanished, their whispers adding to the cacophony. As the situation worsened, Evelyn sought help from the town's historian, Mrs. Abernathy. An elderly woman with a vast knowledge of Harrow's Edge's history, Mrs. Abernathy had always been fascinated by the town's legends and lore. Together, they delved into the old library, poring over dusty tomes and forgotten manuscripts. One night, while leafing through a particularly ancient book, Evelyn found a reference to a similar fog that had plagued the town centuries ago. The manuscript spoke of an ancient ritual performed by the town's founders to banish the fog, but it was cryptic and incomplete. Determined, Evelyn and Mrs. Abernathy continued their research, consulting every resource available. They discovered that the fog was not a natural occurrence, but a manifestation of a malevolent entity. The fog fed on the life force of those it enveloped, trapping their souls and using their voices to lure new victims. The ritual, as they pieced it together, involved a series of specific steps, gathering rare ingredients, invoking ancient incantations, and making a profound sacrifice. Evelyn knew that performing the ritual was their only hope, but it would come at a great cost. As they prepared for the ritual, the fog grew more aggressive, It infiltrated homes, slipping through cracks and keyholes, its whispers now punctuated with screams of torment. Paranoia and fear gripped Harrow's Edge. The townspeople barricaded themselves indoors, but the fog's insidious nature meant nowhere was truly safe. Evelyn and Mrs. Abernathy worked tirelessly, supported by a small group of brave volunteers. Among them was Tom Harding, a grizzled fisherman who had lost his son to the fog years ago. His grief had hardened into a resolve to see the entity banished once and for all. One evening, the fog launched its most vicious attack yet. Tendrils of mist slithered through the streets, and the voices within it became deafening. Evelyn, Tom, and Mrs. Abernathy barricaded themselves in the library, turning it into a makeshift command center. They knew they had to act quickly before the fog consumed them all. The ritual required 3 rare ingredients: a sprig of heather from the cliffs, a vial of seawater collected under a full moon, and the blood of a willing sacrifice. Each ingredient was imbued with significant meaning and power, tied to the land and the sea that defined Harrow's Edge. Evelyn and Tom set out to gather the heather. The journey to the cliffs was fraught with danger. The fog thickened as they approached, and the whispers became more insistent. The mist seemed almost alive, swirling around their feet and pulling at their clothes. As they climbed, Evelyn saw visions of her deceased parents, their faces twisted in agony. They pleaded for her to join them, to end her suffering. Tom, too, was haunted by the ghost of his son, who accused him of abandoning him to the fog. The visions were relentless, but Evelyn and Tom pushed through, relying on each other for strength. When they finally reached the cliffs, they found the heather growing in abundance. Evelyn carefully cut a sprig, feeling the weight of their task. They returned to the library, where Mrs. Abernathy had prepared the other components. The seawater had been collected under the last full moon by a young fisherman who had since vanished, his sacrifice ensuring they had what they needed. Now, all that remained was the blood of a willing sacrifice. With the ingredients gathered, the group reconvened in the library's basement. Mrs. Abernathy explained the final part of the ritual. Someone pure of heart had to offer their life willingly. Evelyn, knowing the stakes, volunteered. Her friends protested, but she was resolute. She could not allow the town she had grown to love to be consumed by the fog. The ritual circle was drawn on the floor with chalk, surrounded by ancient symbols and the flickering light of candles. Evelyn stood in the center, clutching the sprig of heather and the vial of seawater. Tom and Mrs. Abernathy began chanting the incantation, their voices steady despite the fear that gripped them. As the final words were spoken, Evelyn felt a surge of energy flow through her. The fog outside raged, battering the walls of the library. With a final determined breath, Evelyn plunged the ritual dagger into her heart, releasing her life force to combat the fog. The fog began to recede, its malevolent power broken by Evelyn's sacrifice. The whispers faded, and the town slowly returned to normal. The townspeople emerged from their homes, dazed but relieved to find the nightmare over. Evelyn's body was found by her friends, a serene expression on her face. She had saved Harrow's Edge at the cost of her own life. A memorial was erected in her honor, and the town vowed never to forget the bravery and sacrifice of the marine biologist who had become their savior. Years later, Harrow's Edge flourished once more. The fog had become a distant memory, and the town prospered. Yet, the story of Evelyn Carter and the malevolent fog was passed down through generations, a reminder of the darkness that had once threatened them and the light that had ultimately prevailed. The townspeople never forgot the lessons learned during those harrowing days. They maintained the library, preserving the ancient texts that had guided Evelyn and Mrs. Abernathy. They continued to honor Evelyn's memory, her sacrifice serving as a testament to the power of courage and selflessness. Decades passed, and the fog was all but a legend told to children around campfires. The town grew and modernized, yet the scars of that dark period remained etched in the collective memory of Harrow's Edge. Evelyn's memorial stood as a solemn reminder of the past. The library became a historical center where locals and tourists alike came to learn about the town's history. Among the visitors was a young girl named Emily, a descendant of Evelyn Carter. Emily had inherited her ancestors' curiosity and courage. She spent hours poring over the ancient manuscripts, fascinated by the tales of the fog and the bravery of her great-grandmother. One foggy evening, Emily found an old diary hidden behind a loose brick in the library's basement. It was Evelyn's journal, detailing her thoughts and fears during the fog's reign. Emily read it cover to cover, feeling a deep connection to the woman who had given so much for her town. One fateful night, the fog returned. It rolled in from the sea, thick and menacing, enveloping Harrow's Edge just as it had done so many years ago. Panic spread through the town, and whispers once again filled the air. Emily, armed with the knowledge from Evelyn's journal, knew that they had to act quickly. She gathered a group of friends who shared her sense of duty and determination. They included Lucas, a tech-savvy teenager with a knack for problem-solving; Sarah, a local history buff who had studied the ancient texts alongside Emily; and Jake, a young fisherman who had heard the stories from his grandfather, Tom Harding. Together, they retraced Evelyn's steps, seeking to replicate the ritual that had saved the town before. The heather, the seawater, and the sacrifice were still needed, but this time they had the advantage of modern technology and a deeper understanding of the ritual. As they prepared, the fog grew thicker and more aggressive, its whispers turning into taunts. Emily and her friends ventured into the fog to gather the heather, just as Evelyn and Tom had done. They faced their own fears and visions, but their bond kept them strong. They returned with the heather, and Sarah revealed that she had already collected the seawater during the last full moon, anticipating that they might need it someday. The final part of the ritual loomed over them, the sacrifice. Emily knew what had to be done. She was ready to follow in her great-grandmother's footsteps, but her friends protested. Lucas, in particular, was adamant that there must be another way. After hours of debate and research, they discovered a loophole in the ancient texts. The sacrifice did not have to be a life for a life. It could be a symbolic offering if performed correctly. They decided to use a blood offering from each member of the group, symbolizing their unity and willingness to protect their home. The ritual was adjusted, and with cautious optimism, they began. In the library's basement, Emily and her friends gathered around the makeshift ritual circle. They placed the sprig of heather and the vial of seawater at its center, surrounded by candles flickering in the dim light. Sarah, with her steady hands, drew the ancient symbols on the floor, while Lucas prepared the incantations on his tablet, blending old traditions with new technology. The fog outside pressed against the windows, its presence palpable and oppressive. Whispers seeped through the cracks, urging them to abandon their efforts and join the lost souls trapped within. Emily felt a chill down her spine, but steeled herself, remembering Evelyn's bravery in the face of similar terror. As they began the ritual, Emily recited the modified incantations, her voice strong despite the fear gnawing at her heart. Sarah poured the seawater into the ritual circle, its silvery glow illuminating the ancient symbols. Lucas activated a digital projection of the heather's essence, enhancing its potency within the circle. Each member of the group, including Jake, who had been silent yet supportive throughout, pricked their fingers and allowed drops of blood to fall onto the heather and into the seawater. It was a symbolic gesture of unity and sacrifice, binding their fates together in the fight against the malevolent fog. As the ritual reached its climax, the fog outside intensified, swirling with fury and desperation. Shadows danced along the library walls, and the whispers grew into a cacophony of rage. Emily felt a surge of energy course through her. a mingling of ancient power and modern resolve. Suddenly, the ritual circle glowed with a blinding light. The room trembled as if caught in the grasp of a great force. Emily and her friends held their ground, their belief in the ritual and each other unwavering. The malevolent entity within the fog fought back, trying to snuff out the light of their hope and determination. But the bond forged through sacrifice and unity proved stronger. The fog began to retreat, its tendrils recoiling as if scorched by the ritual's power. Emily could feel the entity's presence diminish, its influence over the town weakening with each passing moment. As dawn broke over Harrow's Edge, the fog dissipated entirely, leaving behind a town bathed in the soft light of morning. The whispers ceased, replaced by a profound silence that spoke of victory. Emily and her friends emerged from the library, weary yet triumphant. The townspeople cautiously stepped out of their homes, disbelief giving way to relief and gratitude. They saw Emily and her friends as heroes, their courage and ingenuity having saved them from the fog's grasp once more. In the days that followed, Harrow's Edge celebrated the newfound peace, but they did not forget the lessons learned. Emily's group continued to study the ancient texts, ensuring that the town remained vigilant against any future threats. They knew that the fog's return was not impossible, but with knowledge and unity, they were prepared. Emily stood by Evelyn's memorial, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sea met the sky. The town had healed, and life had returned to normalcy, but Emily knew that their vigilance must endure. She placed a sprig of heather at the base of the memorial, a tribute to the sacrifices made and the unity that had saved Harrow's Edge. The story of Emily and her friends joined the town's legends, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of unity and courage in the face of darkness. Evelyn Carter's name continued to be spoken with reverence, her legacy of bravery inspiring each new generation to protect their home and each other. The day began like any other in Harrow's Edge, with the townspeople going about their routines, blissfully unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Emily Carter was in the town's library, buried in an old tome about local legends, when the first tendrils of fog crept inland. She glanced out the window, noting the unusual thickness of the mist. "Strange weather we're having," she muttered to herself, turning back to her book. As the day wore on, the fog grew denser, shrouding the town in an eerie silence. By evening, the streets were deserted, and an unnatural chill hung in the air. Emily closed the library, locking the doors behind her, and made her way home. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the fog pressing in around her like a living entity. The following morning, Harrow's Edge was in turmoil. Several residents had vanished overnight, leaving behind empty homes and footprints leading towards the sea. Emily's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, was among the missing. Panic spread through the town like wildfire, and whispers of a curse began to circulate. Emily met with her friend Sarah at the local diner, the usual bustle replaced by hushed conversations and anxious glances. "Have you heard about the disappearances?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Emily nodded, her mind racing. "We need to find out what's going on. There must be something in the town's history that can explain this." Together, they decided to dig into the town's past, hoping to uncover clues that might help them understand the fog and the disappearances. Emily and Sarah spent hours in the library, poring over old documents and maps. They discovered a series of journals written by one of the town's founders, detailing the arrival of Captain Elias Blackwood and his crew. The journals revealed that the settlers had betrayed the pirates, luring them to Harrow's Edge under the guise of peace before ambushing and executing them. "We must have angered his spirit," Emily concluded, her heart heavy with the weight of their ancestors' sins. "He's come back for revenge." They shared their findings with the town's mayor, Mr. Bennett, who was initially skeptical, but soon realized the gravity of the situation as more residents disappeared. "We need to find a way to appease his spirit," he urged, desperation creeping into his voice, "before it's too late." As the fog thickened, the survivors gathered in the town hall, searching for a solution. Emily suggested performing a ritual to put Captain Blackwood's spirit to rest, but they needed more information on how to do it. Emily, Sarah, and a group of volunteers braved the fog to search for clues in the abandoned lighthouse, believed to be the epicenter of the supernatural activity. The journey was fraught with danger, the fog whispering and shifting around them, trying to lead them astray. In the lighthouse, they found an old chest containing relics and a parchment detailing a ritual to banish the spirit. They hurried back to the town hall, determined to save their community. With the instructions from the parchment, they gathered the necessary items: a vial of seawater, a piece of driftwood, and black candles. Emily, as the one who had uncovered the truth, was chosen to lead the ritual. As they began, the fog outside seemed to grow angrier, swirling violently around the town hall. Emily's voice trembled as she recited the incantations, but she pressed on, feeling the weight of the town's survival on her shoulders. The candles flickered and the seawater glowed, casting an eerie light over the room. The fog pressed against the windows, its whispers turning into a deafening roar. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and the ghostly figure of Captain Elias Blackwood appeared before them. His eyes burned with fury, and his presence filled the room with dread. "You dare to summon me!" he hissed, his voice echoing with centuries of hatred. Emily stood her ground, her heart pounding. "We seek to right the wrongs of our ancestors and put your spirit to rest." Blackwood laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You think a simple ritual can undo the betrayal I suffered?" "We have to try," Emily replied, her voice steady. "For the sake of our town." The captain's figure wavered, and the fog outside seemed to thicken, pressing against the windows with greater force. The ritual continued, but Emily sensed it wasn't enough. They needed a greater sacrifice to appease Blackwood's wrath. She glanced at Sarah and the others, knowing what had to be done. "Emily, no!" Sarah cried, realizing her friend's intention. "It's the only way," Emily insisted, stepping into the circle of candles. "To save the town." As she recited the final incantation, Emily felt a searing pain as Blackwood's spirit tried to consume her. She focused on the faces of her friends and neighbors, drawing strength from their hope and determination. With a final agonized cry, Blackwood's spirit was pulled into the ritual, and the fog began to dissipate. Emily collapsed, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. As the sun rose over Harrow's Edge, the fog lifted, revealing a town forever changed. The missing residents began to return, dazed but unharmed, their memories of the fog a distant nightmare. Emily recovered slowly, her sacrifice and bravery remembered by all. The town honored her and Sarah for their courage, and the old lighthouse was restored as a symbol of their victory over the darkness. Harrow's Edge rebuilt itself, stronger and more united, never forgetting the lessons of the past. Emily continued her work as a librarian, her love for her town deepened by the trials they had overcome together. Years later, Emily stood at the lighthouse, gazing out at the sea. The town had flourished, and the legends of Captain Elias Blackwood were a distant memory. Yet the spirit of unity and courage remained, a testament to the strength of Harrow's Edge. Emily smiled, knowing that no matter what the future held, her town would face it together, with the same bravery that had saved them from the fog's grasp. The story of their triumph would be told for generations, a beacon of hope and resilience in the face of darkness.
Thank you for joining us on Fear Files, where fear has a story. From haunted artifacts to spectral fogs, these tales have unfolded the mysteries of the supernatural. Remember to subscribe and stay tuned for more spine-tingling stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, beware the shadows and keep your fears close.